Hello guys, can you hear me? This is my first time live streaming, so there might be a bit of a technical snag at the start, but hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. So please, if the audio quality is good, then can you give me a comment and type in the chat box below, just so I know that you guys can all hear me okay. And then we can start getting into the questions, any questions you might have, and I'll start talking a little bit about what I've been doing the past 2 months. Sounds good, Roman Fox. Okay, brilliant, thank you. So, first of all, Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, hope you all enjoyed your holidays. And a bit of a cold's coming around at the moment in England, so hopefully it doesn't affect my voice too much. So yeah, how I want to lay this out, basically, I'm going to start talking about my goals from the past month and what I'm going to do next month. And any questions in between that anyone wants to ask, please put in the comments and ask, and I'll try to answer it the best I can. So yeah, so as you guys know, if you've been following my videos, I've been using link.com, and I went through Spanish conversations and a host of short stories for beginners written by Ollie Richards, and then a few YouTube videos which are listed at the bottom here. So I think that's quite an important point. What I've been doing and have been trying to do is, so Spanish conversations was for the bulk of that time I was only going through one chapter a day, so I was trying to go through that pretty intensively. Then when I switched to the short stories, I kind of went through that. There's 3 chapters or for each story, so I literally did 1 story a day, like 3 chapters a day, and then went into YouTube videos after. So I'm trying to mix up like more intensive with extensive stuff, and trying to mix up kind of learners content with more authentic content in the beginner stages. So I think that went pretty well. And then also I've been supplementing with immersions. So if I just go to my list on Netflix, here, okay, yeah, so my list on Netflix here. So I watched all of Elite, and some shows from Mr. Young. If you're a beginner to Spanish specifically as well, this show is actually pretty simple, quite simple language, which is quite good, and it's fairly easygoing, fairly light humour. It's one of those kind of teen drama sort of things, which is quite good for a beginner, but it's not, the plot, there's not really any plot to it, so it's not as interesting. So I switched to watching Money Heist here, Casa de Papel. I'm on episode 30 now, and it is really, really, really good. I'm not understanding kind of everything, but I think you've got to learn to kind of deal with a certain amount of noise and kind of accept that, okay, when you start learning a language, especially in the beginning, you're not going to understand everything, and to kind of expect that you would even understand close to everything after like 1 or 2 months is just, it just doesn't work like that. It takes a very, very long time. So I think getting comfortable with the idea that we shouldn't understand everything and we won't understand everything can kind of be freeing in the fact that, okay, now you can just kind of relax and just enjoy it, consume loads of content, and just pick up what you can. So and then by doing that, this kind of vague outline picture that you get at the start is going to start to become more and more clear, which is what was happening over the past month. Towards the start, I'm obviously only just about following the plot, but then as I go further and further in, you start to pick up more and more and more, and that kind of vague picture becomes a little bit clearer as you go on. So if anyone's learning Spanish specifically, all of these shows here are European Spanish with CC closed caption subtitles on Netflix. Apart from these 2, these are both I think they're maybe Mexican Spanish, and apart from these 2 here, Bleach and Full Metal don't have any subtitles. But yeah, so I've been watching La Casa de Papel, which is really, really good, and I'm pretty enjoying that so far. So yeah, the YouTube videos, if you find it here. So these are the ones I did in the first month. Going down, you have a few different things. So I went over 6 tips to learn English faster, something about a toxin, a parrot and a dog, some videos about veganism, Skyrim, and some videos about history. So importing videos from YouTube's been really good, especially stuff like this. So you can see here the history of Catalonia in like 10 minutes, and because the videos this guy does is like really visual, you can see from the picture there he's like pointing, and there's lots of visual clues when you're watching it. So kind of reading through the transcript on Link and then watching the video after, you can understand a lot. And his channel's really good. He actually has a bunch of different videos which you can see I've kind of imported down here. So if anyone's learning Spanish, I can leave a link to this guy's channel after the video. And then apart from that, in terms of general immersion, I quite like playing video games, so I've been playing a bit on Steam. Mostly I'm playing Skyrim, which is really cool because you kind of this big open world, this big open game world, you're kind of walking about inside the game, and if you point at like a door or something, it'd say, you know, the word for door in Spanish and say like open door. So you can kind of visually see what you're looking at. It's kind of walking around in the really big 3D dictionary, but then you're walking around and you've got like the storyline there, and you've got like a character that you're trying to get better, and that's really cool. And all of the audio in this has text to it in terms of subtitles, and it's normally 1 or 2 lines here and there, followed by lots of like different nouns and like open door and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And if anyone's a fan of South Park as well, this language in here is quite, it can be a bit crude and some of the voices might be a bit squeaky, but in terms of the language, it's not too hard. So I've been doing that a little bit as well, 12 hours into that, and that's really can understand probably most of what's going on with that because it's quite a visual game as well, and that's going pretty good. Yeah, so let me just think about what else. So that was what I did last month. So I quickly want to talk about what I'm going to do next month, and then that'll bring me on to a point which is that I wanted to bring up, which is how to make language learning in general more progressive. So yeah, so this next month, coming into month 3, this will be the start of month 3, so I've had 2 months already. I'm trying to get completely away from all learners resources. So I started reading, if anyone here is familiar with Steve Kaufman, he's a brilliant polyglot and YouTuber, and he's watched a bunch of his videos before that have really helped me out. And he has the book, The Linguist, which is basically split into 3 sections. There's the introduction, and then it's split into 3 main sections, which is kind of a bit autobiography / his journey along with lots of cultural tips and insights and stuff like that. The middle bit's about the attitude of a linguist, because the attitude is by far the most important thing. Boris says hi. Hi Boris, how are you? What are your goals for 2019? What are you learning at the moment? And any New Year's resolutions that are language related or otherwise. And also, if you're watching this video as well, please give me a comment, let me know where you're from, what your name is, what you're learning and stuff like that. So yeah, and then the third part of this book is how to actually learn a language. So it's about 60 chapters, 63 chapters here, which is quite long, but the thing is they're pretty short chapters, and each one is audio, and it's free here on Link if you already have a subscription, so that's pretty good. I'm on chapter 10, so this is like my main point of focus for January. And apart from that, going on with the theme of language learning, I also found TED Talk, which is how to learn a language and contribute to society, have full subtitles. So I've got the transcript for this as well, so I'm going to read and listen through to this as well. So this is following on the theme of language learning for this month. So 2 points I wanted to talk about that is that going into stuff now that I personally find very interesting and would be consuming anyway in English, and just trying to consume that in the target language, I think is incredibly powerful, because when I'm kind of there reading through, I mean, you can see here 48% unknown words in this book, so like I'm struggling through, I'm looking up words, I'm fighting my way through. Maybe you get a hazy understanding the first time, but I want to understand it, because the content of what it's about is so interesting to me, and I think that's really, really powerful. So the first thing is fun and authenticity in the fact that it's native content. I'm interested about IPA. What is IPA, Boris? Oh, the International Phonetic Alphabet. Okay. So I don't actually know much about the IPA myself, but I've heard other people say if you wanted to learn a bunch of languages, it can really help kind of get the phonetics down early on. So I'll be interested to know how you get on with that, Ronan. I'm also from the UK, and the thing that I'm struggling with is sticking to a language / a course. A lot of the content from Asimov's TV gets really, really boring really quickly. Yeah, that's something I can relate to a lot, Ronan, because the content in these textbooks are kind of, they're good for like getting a foot in the door, but the thing is they're so dry, a lot of it, that you just get bored with it so quickly. So I remember when I was learning Cantonese, it was just be over 2 years ago now, I was going through and I had Teach Yourself book for Cantonese, and it's split into like these 25 different chapters, each with 2 dialogues, so that's 50 dialogues, and they're all like kind of really artificial and role play. So like, oh, some Mr. whatever Wong is going into the shop or going to the post office to do this, and it's so artificial, and there's nothing, it is dry and it is boring. But I found in the early stages, when you're kind of trying to get a grasp on the language, that kind of easy content is easier low level content for beginners is kind of can be really good to get your foot in the door, because you're kind of discovering the language and you're thinking, oh well, this is how this works, this is how that bit works. You can kind of learn a bit more, and you're kind of fighting your way through that, getting a toehold on the language, and that in itself is quite interesting, that kind of discovery part of it. But as soon as you get past the beginners stage and you kind of start to get a bit more a bit more like after being a bit better, moving on from that bit better, you're starting to understand more, that stuff becomes very, very dry very quickly. So what language are you learning, Ronan, and how long have you been learning for? So what I'd recommend with that is, a lot of the time when I got bored in the past as well was because I was using the same thing for too long. So say when I was learning Cantonese, if I got really bored with Teach Yourself, because that's all I did for like a month and a half. So what I'm doing now is changing it up every month. So if I want to stick on beginners content, maybe month 1 that book, month 2 I'd be going over to the dialogues on CantoneseClass101.com and kind of using them, and you're kind of covering the same ground in different angles. But because I'm switching up the material more, it is a bit more interesting. The other thing I'd probably recommend is, if you're getting bored with it, then maybe it's better to just, depending on your level, I should recommend doing this quite early on, going into more authentic content that you actually find interesting. So for example, if it's a language on Link, you can find really short YouTube videos that are like 1 minute or 2 minute long that are quite interesting, and because they're short, there's not that much language in a minute long video, so they're quite easy in comparative to watching like a movie, obviously. So kind of switching onto that more authentic but short content can also be quite cool. But yeah, I'd be skeptical to give you any more concrete advice than that, because I don't know so much more about you. So Ronan, what language are you learning, and what's your level? But so Boris says, but most of the time lack the chance to use the new language I recently learned. Yeah, that's another thing as well, because I guess in Hong Kong you're pretty much limited to people speaking Mandarin, Cantonese and English. So I think you said you were learning German before, right, Boris? So if you're learning German, then perhaps you don't get a lot of opportunities to practice, and that can be quite disheartening, because you kind of feel like, oh, I'm putting in all this effort, but what's the point if I'm not even getting to use the damn thing? So what I did, which helped me out, is, I mean, come on, this is the 21st century going into 2019 now, so you have stuff like HelloTalk, italki, mylanguageexchange.com. If you also go on a website called meetup.com, you can find local meetups in your area to actually go and meet people face to face, and that's really cool. So if you want to meet people in real life, I'd recommend meetup.com, and also italki and HelloTalk. You can meet like pen pals online and do language exchanges, and kind of that in-person connection, if you're kind of lacking the like the interaction, can really help. And one other thing that can really help as well is couchsurfing.com, because you can actually search hosts by the language they speak. So if you want to search for hosts in Hong Kong, for example, that speak German, then you can search that and you can go over to the website. So if you don't have a website, this is couchsurfing.com. It is a website for travellers, network of travellers, and you can use it to get free accommodation. So if I don't know where you live in Hong Kong, so if I just facts, so if I just search Hong Kong here, and then you can search find the hosts, see local hosts, 50,000. These are all people that live in Hong Kong that are offering to host travellers and wanting to meet new people. So if you go in here and you click find host, down to more filters, scroll down here, language spoken. So for example, you wanted to find German speakers in Hong Kong, you click the filter button, and especially if it's a big city like Hong Kong, it should have all sorts of people. So here now you've got a list of people that all speak German. So this can be really cool to meet people in real life, and also meetup.com as well, which is a different website here, meetup.com, and this is really cool. So yeah, I mean, Boris, that's something we all struggle with, but I think meeting people is the right way to go, and I recommend these two websites here. So TV series is the best choice. Yeah, TV series are super cool, I think, because you know they're real and they've usually got a plot line and it's interesting, and they're the type of thing that I personally enjoy doing in English. So what I try to do is basically whatever I enjoyed English, I try to implement that as much in my target language and immerse myself in fun stuff as much as possible. So I think you're right on that, but the kind of caveat to go with TV series, Boris, is that if you're a beginner, you won't understand a lot, and for a lot of people especially, it can be really disheartening to kind of know that there's so much language out there that I don't understand yet. But I think some of this goes down to personality type, because when I'm watching TV in a new language, it's kind of like, oh wow, look at all these like new stuff I haven't learned yet. Look at all these opportunities to pick up new words, learn about the culture and all that stuff. But obviously if it's just noise, it can be very boring. So me personally, I'm a big fan of anime. So when I was trying to learn Cantonese before, I watched One Piece, Hoi Sat Wong, and Death Note, Seimong Bakge in Cantonese, because you already know the plot. And I did the same thing with Spanish. The first series I watched was called Hajime no Ippo, because I'm a boxing fan as well. That was my favourite anime, and it was in Spanish dub, and kind of it didn't matter that I didn't understand everything, because you know, it didn't matter that I didn't understand everything, because I know what the plot is already, and also it's fun. You can just watch the fight scenes and enjoy it. So I tried Japanese. So Ronan Fox says I tried Japanese for a few months, Chinese for a bit, but I think the main problem is the scripts make it hard for you to access interesting content. Yeah, that is true. I wonder if I have my book here, but especially with Chinese and Japanese, with the use of Chinese characters, I'm surprised you haven't learnt Japanese. Ronan, I do want to learn Japanese, but I think because of the way I work, I think I work better focusing on just one thing at a time. So in the future, you know, maybe in a few years, I'll learn Japanese, and it is kind of in my overall life plan, but I think I'm going to put it on the back burner for now. Yeah. So onto the scripts thing. I have a few videos previously about how I learned to read and write Chinese. And the thing is, when you first look at it and it's just a load of these alien characters that you've never seen before, they look and feel very, very intimidating. So for me, when I was looking at this kind of this page of just squiggles that I had no idea how to make heads or tails of, with no way to break it down, it's so intimidating and kind of disheartening in a way. And then but then you realise shortly after, the more you learn about Chinese characters, the less intimidating they seem, and the more you learn, the easier it is to pick up new characters. So they're made up of these small components, which is there's about 200 of these components that make up every single character in Chinese. So if you kind of learn the simple ones that are pictographs, the very, very simple ones, and like stuff like yat, for number one, it's just one line, or like a tree looks kind of like a tree. So if you learn these simple pictographs first, and then you can kind of build them up into the ones putting those pictographs together in different ways, and learn it in logical order, then the whole thing becomes a lot less intimidating and a lot easier. The best book I've seen for this is called Remembering. So I used the Chinese version, Remembering the Traditional Hanzi by James Heisig. But it was originally for Japanese, so if you're trying to do Japanese, then the Japanese one's Remembering the Kanji, or RTK, and I think that teaches all of the standard use kanji, so there's like 2,000 of them. So that's really cool. But for accessing interesting content, the other thing you could do, I mean, they have Chinese on link, you could import and try to read with the pinyin above it, or there's a cool website here which my friend showed me for Japanese here actually, and if you want, because Japanese there's quite a lot of content available, especially for stuff that's like, because there's so many Japanese learners and there's so much out there in terms of Japanese media, there's a lot of like transcripts and stuff to videos where you don't necessarily have to work with even the kanji at all. So if you are learning Japanese, probably it's good to learn the hiragana and the katakana first, because that's just like an alphabet and you could do that in maybe like a week or a few days. But if you want to just go with that, then kanji can wait until later. So this website here, animelon.com for Japanese, which my friend showed me, my internet's been a bit slow now, but basically when you click on an episode you can get transcripts and you get hiragana, or you can also choose the subs here. So here they say full Japanese, Romaji, which is like the English one, which is I probably wouldn't use Romaji, I'd just learn the hiragana and the katakana straight away. But then you can access the transcripts in these, and you know, you can download it, or you can download transcripts to Netflix and convert them to hiragana using like a converter, and that way, if you want, could be a way to kind of access interesting content without the that could be a way to access the transcript without knowing the kanji. So maybe that'd be a try, but it is a grind and it does take a long time to get used to. So that'd be what I'd recommend. I'm surprised you haven't learned Japanese. Boris kanji, what an opening, legendary. Are you talking about Death Note? Boris says Seimon Bakkei, which is the Cantonese name for Death Note. Thank you, that's a really cool idea. You're welcome. I hope it helps. And any questions you have after this, you know. Obviously I know I'm a really small channel, so I want to try and like connect and like hopefully we can help each other out, and I can kind of speak to you guys as much as possible, and we can kind of support each other. That's one of the main reasons why I wanted to make the channel in the first place, to try and get this support network. So any questions you have at all with anything, just leave it in the comment section, and depending on what it is, either I'll type out a comment, or maybe if it warrants it, I'd make a full video. So yeah, thanks for the questions so far. So trying to remember what I was talking about before was My month's goal for this month, I said already, was to read this book, The Linguist, by Steve Kaufman. So I sort of talked about authenticity, I think, already, which is just the idea of using authentic, real content. That's actually interesting because, like Ronan mentioned earlier, beginners' textbooks can get stale and boring very, very quickly, and there's nothing that would kill your language routine faster than hating to study. Because you want to look forward to it. So if, for example, me now in Spanish, I'm really looking forward to reading The Linguist. I read 2 chapters this morning, they're super interesting. I'm motivated because I want to read and finish the book. That is, I think, the ideal. But the problem with Asian languages for an English speaker is, I think, like Ronan mentioned earlier, the barrier for entry is so high. So it is really hard sometimes knowing where to go, but if you're in an interest in anime, then some simple ones could work out, maybe One Piece or Dragon Ball, or also short YouTube videos. So yeah, and the other thing I want to talk about briefly is this idea of progressiveness. So if you look back at the goals I set over the past 2 months and the goal I'm setting next month and for my 4th month, which I'll talk about in a second, is it's not quite linear, but it is progressive. So beginners content, month 2 intermediate content, month 3 might be reading a book which seems a lot more difficult on the surface, but it's non-fiction, so it's just trying to get a point across, not using too complicated language, and it's also on a subject I'm familiar with. I've watched a bunch of Steve's videos in the past when I was learning Cantonese, and the stuff he's writing about in his book is more or less exactly what he says in his videos. So if it's about a topic I'm familiar with and interested in, and it's non-fiction, it can be a lot easier. And then if you look at my next month, this is a book called Leaf Storm by Gabriel Marquez, the very famous Colombian author. And some of his books I've been wanting to read for a while. If you look at here at the amount of unknown words, it goes from 48% to 64%. And because this is a fiction book, a novel, they tend to use much more artistic language. It's not so much about just getting a message across as a non-fiction. It's a kind of, how can we express it and convey ideas in an interesting way? How can we tell the story, and how can we kind of, it's all about playing with words and doing stuff and using a lot more complicated and artistic vocabulary that you wouldn't necessarily use in everyday life. So that idea of progression, I think, is quite important. And actually, come to think of it, he has this in this book in Japanese as well. And you can have on link, I think in Japanese, you can have get it so they get furigana, which is just like the katakana above the characters. So if you don't know how to read a character, then you can see what the hiragana is and just look at that for pronunciation, and then you can click on it for the meaning. So if you go through Heisig first, it will be a lot easier because you start recognizing the characters. But I think if that seems like something that would just be too boring for you, then you can just brute force it and just start with shorter content and do a lot of repetition at first and then kind of build up to longer content after. But on the surface of it, I think China's characters are very, very interesting, which is probably why I actually quite enjoy going through Heisig and learning more about it, which is weird about it. So Ronan says, I feel like I should get Twitter again. There seems to be a pretty supportive network of people out there for language learning. Yeah, I created Twitter to try and help promote my website and channel a bit. But the thing is, I never used Twitter before I created it, and I'm kind of really not in the habit of using it because I don't use social media too much. I was always more of a Facebook person, I guess, because that's what I got used to. But yeah, I've heard a lot of people say Twitter has a lot of supportive stuff. Twitter, and then there's like subreddits as well. And if you want to ask very specific questions, then you can find a lot of experienced language learners, and also Facebook groups as well. There's a few people react and comment and stuff. So yeah, I think that's quite a good idea. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't actually have a personal Twitter, but this is my channel name here, Twitter at fulltimefluency.com, so I'll just leave the handle there as well. So yeah, any questions at all, I'm happy to Twitter That's why I'm tempted to pick up my French from high school again on Link, because you can access compelling content much quicker. Yeah, that has been my experience so far learning Spanish. It's not even close, you know. So like comparing, if I go on Netflix and put on a Spanish TV show, and from what I understand and people have told me, I think Spanish is supposed to be a little bit easier than French for English speakers. So maybe French should be a little bit more difficult. I don't know, but if I go on, I can kind of see a Netflix series, and if I find one where they're not speaking too quickly, I can put the Spanish subtitles on, and just through cognates and context you can understand a lot. And also actually I imported some articles about science here, so if I just click on one, this is about fractional distillation, which is, if you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter, but like I found in Spanish at least, the more scientific and technical the stuff you'll get reading is, the more cognates there is. So reading through this, if you know what fractional distillation is, I gave this to my brother who doesn't, my girlfriend who doesn't speak a word of Spanish, and she's not even a scientist, and she can, you know, understand a lot of it without. So if you know about a topic, which if you want to know about my background, I studied chemical engineering at uni, and I work now as a process engineer, so I'm quite interested in science. So the amount of cognates in there is super quick, easy. But I tried reading about it was a bit about neuroscience. It was how the brain works. I had articles by Barbara Oakley about the diffuse and the focus and diffuse mode of learning, and how your brain switches between these two modes, and I read about it in Cantonese. And I basically made the materials myself because it wasn't available. I translated it and paid someone on Fiverr. And it was really difficult. Stuff like language learning, because I was familiar with the topic and it was more everyday sort of stuff that I was speaking about, it wasn't too difficult, but that was really difficult. So for sure the barrier for entry in terms of Romance languages for an English speaker is much lower. But I would, to add a caveat on that, if you're not interested in French and you're just learning it because you think, oh well, it would probably be easier, if you're passionate about Japanese, then you know the only difference in the end of the day is the amount of time it takes. So there is a high barrier for entry, but it just takes a bit more patience, a bit more perseverance, and you'll get there eventually, like with anything. So I'd be cautious to go with it just because you think it'll be easier. But if you think that French is an interesting language and you did it in school and it's like a good starting point, and you're interested in the culture and the theatre and the food and whatever as well, then I think that's a great idea. So maybe something to think about a bit there. What do you think about endangered languages? I don't know much about them, to be honest, Boris. The reason I learned Cantonese, and even some people call that an endangered language, I guess, was because I came into contact with a lot of people when I was at uni playing table tennis. So I came in contact with a lot of people from Hong Kong, and now my girlfriend of over 4 years is from Hong Kong as well, and I was kind of seeing a family and a friend. So it was very, I think if you've got friends or like a reason to learn this endangered language, then I think you should go for it, you know. And if you have a reason, then do it. But it'd probably be harder to find resources, which is a bit of a pickle. But I'm sure if you ask around online and do a bit of digging, probably you'll find that there is maybe more resources than you think. You just have to dig a bit harder. But in terms of direct experience, I don't have a lot. Boris says Duolingo. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Duolingo. The thing is, I think it can be useful in the way that, like, if you have a very busy schedule, you can kind of give you that contact throughout the day, and it's super easy, it can be fun, it's gamey. But I think if it gives in people, and it can be a good starting point in the way to get a foothold on the language. So if you go, oh, I don't have time right now, I'm just going to do Duolingo for a few months, and then in a few months later when I start listening and reading more, then it'll give me a head start, which I think is true. Or if you use it to kind of supplement your learning. So most of the time I've used Duolingo is when I'm waiting for a bus or something like that. But I think as a mode of learning in itself, Maybe it's just me, but I don't retain the stuff that well, and I find it a bit boring and stale doing just Duolingo, and I don't retain that much information. So yeah, but I think as a support tool, it's super useful, and it's just more the gamey side and how easy it is to use. So that's pretty cool. I also use Twitter. Great. If you follow me on Twitter, Boris, in the link below, I will follow you back. GCSE Chemistry Flashbacks. Yeah, I think we did that in GCSE Chemistry, if I remember right. Yeah, so Sashin recorded the message. I think she said, how tall am I? I'm 5'8" ish. So yeah, I'm 5'8". So Sashin, where are you from? It's nice to see you. What language are you learning, if it's any, or if you're just here to stop and have a chat, then it's nice to meet you. And what are your goals for 2019, language related or otherwise? Yeah, so I'm probably won't keep the live stream going on for too much longer because I'm running out of stuff to talk about. All the kind of pre-made topics I had thinking about already that I've already talked about a bit. But actually, there is one thing that I've so if anyone has any more questions, then please leave them here. There is one other thing that I've been thinking about recently, and this was in relation to my experience learning to read Chinese, is that don't you post your monthly schedule on your blog? No, I tend to make YouTube videos about it instead. Do you think it would be helpful to post it on my blog, Ronan? Because before I started learning Spanish, I kind of set out an outline of what I wanted to do for 6 months and chose all the resources and stuff. So if you think it would be useful, I can publish that on my website and show you kind of, you can see what I plan to do each month to progresses. But the thing is, it's not an exact science. So I'm kind of like tweaking it as I go. But yeah, I don't at the moment. I do monthly videos on YouTube about what my goals are. But if you think that I'd be useful, I can publish it. I'm having a bit of technical issues with my blog at the moment in the back end, which is why I haven't uploaded in a while. Because the builder I use to edit the posts in the back has just been having all sorts of problems. So I'm on with the tech team, but as soon as that gets fixed, I can upload my schedule. And I actually have it already. This is actually taken as an excerpt from here. This is taken from a bigger post of my 6 months, and I can post that if you think that'd be interesting. Yeah. So onto what I was talking about before. Something I've been toying with recently is the idea of efficiency versus fun. Because when I was learning how to read and write Chinese, I did a lot of flashcards, a lot of Anki. I did a technique known as sentence mining, which is when you basically take sentences from real context, authentic context, a bit above your level, add it to Anki and learn it using the spaced repetition system. If you don't know what SRS is, spaced repetition system, it's basically just a way to learn stuff really efficiently. So as soon as when you're about to forget something, this app tells you when you're about to forget it and tells you to review it, so it brings it back into your memory and helps you remember stuff more long term. So I put a lot of stuff in that, to about 1,000 sentences, and then I started to get super bored with Anki because I was doing like 200 reviews a day, and just reviewing flashcards is really boring. So what I did in the end was just stop adding new cards and focus on reading. So although maybe just reading and looking at words on the fly as I'm going is not the best strategy, but because it's pretty good, because you're exposing yourself to so much content just through reading. I was reading about 2 hours a day in Cantonese, so all the most common words, and if you're reading a book, the certain vocabulary come up again and again and again. So without repetition built in to some software, you can get anywhere in a book. So as long as the program itself is still quite efficient, I don't mind as long as the method itself still is efficient, it does get you where you want to go. For me personally, now I'm under the camp that I'm happy to sacrifice efficiency for fun. So I'm happy to do less flashcards and read more, because reading is much more fun. And I think it's yeah, I think it'll be good anyway. Oh, Andy Roberts, I just woke up. Hi Andy, how are you? So I think Ronan was talking about Twitter earlier and people interacting on Twitter. I know Andy through Facebook groups and Twitter, and he also has a YouTube channel and a blog which I believe is called Oregon Polyglot, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy. And he's always kind of pondering the best ways to go about it, and he has a ton of really super helpful advice as well. And his goal for this year is actually learning. He said he's been learning Japanese for a while, I believe, and something I think it's fair to say that we'd all struggle with is the reading side of it, because the kanji are such a big barrier for entry. And he's just set the goal, I think, of reading 365 hours of Japanese next week. So one thing Ronan was saying earlier, Andy, is that basically he's tried learning Japanese and a bit of Chinese, but the barrier for entry in terms of interesting content is a lot higher than European languages like French, where you can just kind of read stuff and have a decent stab at what stuff might mean, given cognates and things. So any particular advice you'd have for getting into interesting content with Japanese? Another thing I didn't mention earlier is manga. I think might be potentially quite good, because I think a lot of manga to teach Japanese kids reading who have the same problem learning kanji is they put furigana above the characters. So maybe reading something like Yotsuba, which is quite simple to start with, or like One Piece or something in a manga form, would be quite easy as well. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on efficiency versus fun I was talking about before. So I don't know, are you guys happy to sacrifice efficiency for fun? Because the way I see it, to get to a high level in a language, especially something like Japanese, takes a very, very long amount of time. So if I'm committing hours of my life to this every day, I want to be doing stuff that I enjoy, and the more I enjoy it, the more happy I am to put in more time. So even if I lose efficiency, if it's so much more fun, I'm going to be mentally more engaged, put in more time and get better results, in my opinion. My goal: 365 hours of reading Japanese for the next year from your birthday in February. I think that's a good I think that's a good goal. What I like about that, Andy, is actually, and for anyone watching, Andy's more experienced than I am in terms of language learning. But what I like about the goal he set is he's not focusing on stuff he can't control. He's not saying I'm going to learn the most 3,000 commonly used kanji and master them and stuff like that. He's just saying I'm going to read 365 hours a year, 1 hour a day, just consuming the material, and if I spend that time reading, the results will happen on itself. And if I focus on the reading as opposed to what I'm learning and just enjoy it and focus on the process of reading and discovery, then I think that's a much less stressful way to approach it. And, you know, believe it or not, it might seem like a mountain to climb at first with reading Chinese, but it does get easier and easier and easier. So I think that's a brilliant idea. Yeah, and I haven't read too much in Chinese. I think I've read 10 books, I'd say, or maybe 11 books, but 6 of them were comic books, so I've only read 5 proper books, and one of them was The Little Prince. So if you take out The Little Prince and the comic books, then that's only 4. So yeah, I've still got a lot of room to improve on my Cantonese, but I'm pretty happy after 2 years. Novels. The novels for older children I read have furigana mostly over the kanji. The grammar is the hard part of reading Japanese, actually. Yeah, I've heard that about Japanese, actually, with the grammar being quite hard. Because it's like a different syntax to English. I think the word order is different. and that's not something I've really dealt with before, because the word order of Cantonese and grammar of Cantonese, the word order itself in terms of basic is quite similar to English. You know, subject, verb, object. Like, I don't know, Yigao Hoi Gungyun, which is like Yigao Hoi Gan Gungyun, which is like, you know, it's fairly close to the word order would say in English, but Japanese, I've heard it's a bit different. So that's how are you tackling the grammar? Because looking at different research on language acquisition by say Stephen Krashen, which I know the name gets thrown around a lot, or looking at other people's experiences, they all say just through sheer exposure and reading tons and consuming lots and lots of content, that you get used to it over time, and it's just a case of putting in the time, spending the time with Japanese, and eventually you'll get used to it. So how are you dealing with grammar? I'm a bit curious to know. I've also heard people recommend Tai Kim's grammar book, because I used to watch a few videos from some Japanese related channels as well. That's right, practice makes progress, as the Polyglot Progress YouTube channel says. Yeah, that's true. I think above all else in language learning, the most important ingredient, if you like, is time. So if you spend the time with the language, you know, and you spend the time reading and listening and speaking, you can basically just relax and try to enjoy it as much as possible. Because if you're putting in the time every day, it may not seem like it at the time, but you will improve and you will get there. So at the end of the day, it's just a matter of time and perseverance, and if you put in the time, you will get there. And the higher level you want to reach, and the further away the language is, the more time you need. And it's, in a nutshell, it's as simple as that. The AJATers, yeah, I used to love Kaz's blog, because when I was learning Cantonese, I figured there's a lot of similarities you can extract from the AJAT website to apply to learning Chinese. So yeah, that was something I really found really useful, and I think the tagline is quite cool in the way that what it says exactly. It's like, you don't know a language, you live it. You don't learn a language, you get used to it, which kind of perfectly sums up the fact that it's just a case of letting your brain get used to it, and eventually over time and practice and daily use and contact, you will get there. I won't go as far as AJAT, but now that I'm at the intermediate level, exposure to any language is key. Yeah, I think AJAT's can be quite extreme for a lot of people. I think it depends on your time frame and what you're trying to do and what level you want to get to. But in my experience, if say the AJAT say 8 hours a day, if you would do 2 hours a day, and it takes, I don't know, say 3 times longer, then that's fine. You know, it's all about enjoying yourself. I mean, I could be wrong here because my experience level is very low. The hardest challenge with language learning is yourself, keeping yourself motivated and being disciplined in the pursuit. Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, Ronan, because the fundamentals of language learning, you know, read and listen a lot, make it progressive, do it every day, put in the time. But I think there's loads of psychological barriers. You know, we all have lives, jobs, and that sort of thing. So stuff always gets in the way. I think almost the best advice for this is just to kind of like relax a bit, because if we stop being so hard on ourselves and just focus on the good and focus on what we are accomplishing and doing, then it'll all fall into place eventually. And I understand that saying this sort of stuff. So say if someone said that to me 2 years ago, I was because I'd not been through the process before, I was in a desperate rush to kind of get to a decent level, and I desperately wanted to do it, and I kind of felt like I need to do it now, otherwise it might not happen and all that stuff. And you can go through all these psychological things in your head, but yeah, that is the hardest part, and I think that's something we all struggle with, me as well, because you can get thoughts come up like, I've been learning for like a year now, why am I still not understanding this YouTube video, or why am I still not doing this? you know, I should be better than this now, and that can be very self-defeating. Yeah, so Ronan, correct. Fortunately, Japanese is my favourite language. I've quit Mandarin Chinese many times because of the lack of motivation. Yeah, I mean, we can't do everything, right, Andy? As much as you'd like to, you can't learn every language in the world. It's just too many in too little time. But you know what? I reckon if you get to a high level in Japanese, especially with the kanji, I think learning Mandarin should be a lot easier. So that's pretty cool to hear. Good luck with Japanese for 2019. I answered your question about grammar above, right above. Bonus line about AJAT. Ah, sorry, I missed that. Some months ago in the past, I focused on grammar, studying grammar books and creating my own sentences. Then, when I go back to reading, I understand it more. That's a nice approach, I think. You're kind of using it as a supplement of your input. So, like, if you read and listen, stuff might be a bit hazy. You go study grammar rules, and it kind of raises your. I think I've heard other people talk about this before, and I've had similar experience. When you go back and look at an explanation, you can kind of like raise your awareness of what it's like. So maybe you kind of see something in a book you reading that you don't understand. You look up a grammar point, you kind of think, oh, I sort of get that, and then as it comes up again later in your reading, it kind of reinforces what you're learning, which is quite a cool way of doing it. Sorry, I missed your comment above. Roden, yeah, that's why I tried to pick up Mandarin, Andy. I have a lot of Chinese friends at university, but I just wasn't passionate about the language. Yeah, if you're not passionate, there's only so much you can do. I mean, I think learning any language requires a lot of time investment, so I'd say passion is really important, and I think passion is what keeps you going. I mean, you talked about before that the hardest thing is yourself, so I feel that what's going to get you through those times of struggle is passion, and it is the want and the desire to do it, and that is going to serve as motivation, but also taking into account what you have already achieved and noticing what you've already achieved would in turn motivate you to do more, which should make you achieve more, in kind of a positive feedback loop as well, which is quite cool. But in terms of Mandarin, I mean, I hear Mandarin a lot, said, like, spoken around and that, but I've always thought Cantonese sounds better. I don't know why. And in terms of movies and stuff as well, I've always thought they have lots of cool stuff available, you know, like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan. Stephen Chow's films are absolutely hilarious, super funny. I'd recommend one called Shaolin Soccer, Sion Namjoon, which is really funny. A bunch of stuff on Netflix as well, and kind of the linked history with England can make it a bit more interesting as well. So yeah, thanks for coming to watch this live stream. I think that just about wraps it up. If anyone has any more questions that they want answering, then feel free to like message me on Twitter or Facebook, or leave me a comment in this video and ask me anytime. I really don't mind. It's like Ronan said, it's about finding a network. So yeah, I really hope you guys have best of luck in this month. And also, I'm curious to know, do you prefer this to my normal videos? I have a better quality mic now because I just bought a new microphone, which hopefully helps with the audio quality. But do you think this sort of format, more informal, just chat and stuff, is better than just my normal monthly video? And if it is, then great, and good luck in your January goals in 2019, and I will see you guys soon. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.